So, hello. I have come into UTS today. I'm looking at something called the Res Hub Studio, which is just in there. I like to look at things like that, kind of facilities as a learning designer, because sometimes we have to assist academics or other people. Sometimes we have to use it ourselves to kind of create media or to feed back to students, like in this instance. So I'm going to use that studio to feed back to my design microcredential students, but I'm really interested to see what the setup is, what sort of hardware, what sort of software, file sizes, do I have logins, how do I get my files, that sort of thing. So once I finish this little intro, I'll go into more detail, I'll bob down a little bit, about what makes a good submission for your assignment 1 and assignment 2. But everyone did really well. It's just I'll feed back just some group feedback with some general comments. So I have decided to test out the what's it called, the Res Hub Studio, which is I'm in at UTS. So this is a facility that is available for staff members and students, research students. So I thought I would check it out because it's all set up with the lights and the good camera, the microphone. I am recording on this device. So I have some feedback that I want to share with my UTS microcredential designing for learning cohort, because I have graded their submissions, and I just wanted to give some general feedback on what I found. So to start off, in our cohort, it's always an interesting aspect that I really like is the fact that our learners come from a really wide range of industry areas, workplaces. So we had about 25 in the cohort this time around. There we had areas such as governance, social justice. There was a group of professional, they were school teachers, but they were tasked with professionally developing their peers. So it's like a train the trainer. So they brought in communication and community, which is interesting, learning outcomes and a learning need. There was quite a few people from the armed forces, and a lot of those were involved with train the trainer, as well as English language and other kind of even use of weapons, that type of thing. So interestingly and appropriately, some of their content was redacted because it's sometimes they're not able to share it. Goes into too much detail. In fact, we don't need the detail in a lot of the work that we do as learning designers. That comes with when we're engaging with a subject matter expert. Because the design subject is designed primarily for our analysis and our design. So the actual build is generally, there's another subject that UTS offers called Create. So that's where you actually get hands-on. We had people from finance and accounting. There was someone that was running an online educational platform, and they were interested in their user journey and what that meant. They were trying. So that was quite an interesting situation, because it was learning and training, but it was also about the design of their system. I'll keep that generic. There was also sales of equipment, even the use of AI. We couldn't escape AI. AI for teaching English language in higher education. But the learning need was within the teachers. So it was another train the trainer type of thing. Had a few people from VET, vocational education and training. So all of this diversity makes my position really interesting. So interesting as well, a few people came with a lot of experience. They were managing learning design teams and they had done that for 20, if not more, years. So their submissions were really interesting as well. So most of the people, in fact, all of you students did a good job in what you submitted. You followed the brief, created your own brief, you followed the criteria that was presented in the assignment. So the best submissions went through, and I do remember emphasising and strengthening this through the weeks. The best submissions had a really clear outline of their students and the context and the learning needs, and that they were developed, that information was developed into nice, clear learning outcomes. So some of the stumbling points on that, some of the learning outcomes were too complicated. We can't achieve, we're not developing a program of learning outcomes. And so about half of the submissions could have had their learning outcomes unpacked even further. There was the ubiquitous clearly understand, which is kind of, we can't really work with that. It doesn't have any grit or it's not specific enough. We like to have achievable skills or knowledge or even values or attributes that are labelled as such. That's where the verbs come in. So when you are asking your learner to, by the end of this session, they will clearly understand something, it's not as usable as phrasing it in another way. So that came up a couple of times. It's not the end of the world. It's just that these obstacles were kind of compromised an otherwise perfect submission. Also, I haven't finished my thought with once we have those established, the all about the learners and their outcomes and our aims. Indeed, we need to propose certain approaches, and so most people did a really good idea of those. Some people went into too much detail as to telling me what they were going to build, like they were going to telling you all about the content or the assets that they might have in an e-learning, which we need the short version, certainly, but some people went into too much detail in that regard. That's maybe for another subject and another assignment. Our emphasis is on, I guess a good example is if our learners would benefit from interacting with their peers, then that's good to describe what that looks like, how it links back to the learner needs and the learning outcomes. But also, this is where we get into the heart of the assignment, which is justifying our decision and backed up by reference to the academic literature. So they're really good assignments or submissions. They clearly articulated that specific to the situation and specific to the learners. There was quite a lot of there was a pattern, there was a cluster of very generic information. The assignment was set up well, but when it came to actually giving me the detail of your justification and how it links to the academic literature, that is the theories, the models, the frameworks, the approaches, that part was just way too generic. It was like a copy and paste, and it was referenced, but it didn't actually give me a sense of what this meant for your learners. So in a way, I was reading all these assignment submissions that were almost identical. They didn't actually go into the detail. Not all of them, of course, but that was where people kind of submitted a less than optimal assignment. Most of you, I've already mentioned this about the context and the learning outcomes, but yeah, this generic information, it's not inaccurate. It's just that we get better result. We get into the spirit and heart of our learning design when we're creating it for an audience, whether that be someone interested in social justice or a school teacher wanting to liaise with their community, or we have to kind of tie it back. What's the learning need? The One of the interesting learning outcomes was related to the lack of confidence. Lack of confidence. So this introduces this really sophisticated and interesting element where it's not just about the content. It's not about delivering content. It's about recognizing what is that lack of confidence? Where did it come from? We're not psychologists. We're not going to kind of, offer therapy for these people. However, we need our learning design to acknowledge that if it's a lack of confidence, how do we unpack that for our learners? What can we do and what can we put into our design to address that need? So it's quite sophisticated thinking, and this is where you get a better result in your submission, because it's not second guessing, it's actually acknowledging your learner's needs, and then how can you address that need within your approach, of course backed up by the academic literature. And I mean, lack of confidence is just one. There's like dozens of these, and I don't know all of them, but you do, because they represent your peers, your students, your industry, all the people that you're aiming to address their learning need. So it gets complicated, which is what we want. ADDIE popped its head up. ADDIE was kind of mentioned in almost 3/4 of these submissions. I always think of ADDIE as a framework. So it's a good model and it's good for workflow, but it doesn't get into the pedagogy or the andragogy. It gives us steps on, and a lot of people acknowledged all of the steps of ADDIE, which was really good, because I mentioned that in our live sessions a few times, the significance of evaluation and then feeding back into the next cycle. One of the things that people acknowledged as well was iteration, which is really quite good. This idea that you don't just rush in, find a solution, you take your time, you gently or firmly or professionally analyse what are your what do you have in front of you, and then you start to work with that on an iteration, and then you find a bit more information. A lot of you sent me versions, and but you had about 6 iterations of your assignment, which was good. So in the real world, sometimes there is a tendency to rush in, come up with a solution quickly, but that's almost like bypassing the learning design stage. So a lot of people liked backwards design. Social learning popped up a lot. Everyone seemed to like Merrill's, or at least most of you, and Gagne's steps. UDL was a really interesting, universal design for learning. In fact, that was one that stood out as having a lot of resonance with people. Because remember, some of these people, you people, have industry experience as learning designers. So that was a common thing that came up, where those people seem to know Bloom's taxonomy and ADDIE. They hadn't ventured into all of the other areas. And so some of those people really approach their whole assignment from a universal design for learning approach, which was really interesting. So I think I might talk about, that's assignment 1. So I was really happy with all of the submissions. There was a diversity in the quality, and you'll be able to read my comments with the feedback that should be available very soon. With assignment 2, which was the reflection, the people that did the best job with that, in fact, the quality of the assignment 2 was generally better. All of you, or most of you, acknowledged you and your context and the change that has occurred, what you have learned. So that was really satisfying for me to read. Some of the people with the teaching background, they could see the difference and overlap. There was a bit of overlap with some of the teaching skills and attributes and knowledge, but learning design has new skills, new knowledge, new approaches. So that was really interesting for me to read, to see that acknowledged more than a few times. Again, I enjoyed reading from the experienced learning designers in the group and what they were bringing, what they had learned, what they already knew. The technology has changed over the last 25 years. So too have some of the learning theories, and some of them have changed with the technology. Again, we heard a lot about the role of ADDIE in some of those reflections. There was this idea of the theory, the relationship maybe between the theory and the practice, because we designed these assignments to be really practical, but incorporating the theory and reflecting your real world. That was really interesting, that some people, most of you, acknowledged that and explored that. Some people were kind of almost telling me how that there was too much theory and there was no practical, which I found really interesting. A few people emphasised that they consulted with their SMEs, subject matter experts, so that was really good for me to hear, because it acknowledges that it's a dynamic situation. You're not just kind of going and doing the microcredential separate from your workplace or your professional practice. You're incorporating it in, which was really good. And in this instance, the subject matter experts were helping to shape what the assignment had in it, which is what we want, because it's reflecting their needs. Again, this idea of iteration came up, which was good. And also the activities, the live sessions, even the Padlets got a mention in some of the reflections. And so it's acknowledging the kind of end user, the learner, your experience as you're engaging with the course. So I can see on this recording I've spent about 15 minutes. So I just wanted to keep this very general and very, very much a broad overview, just to feed back from my perspective what I found in the submissions from the March 2025 Design microcredential. So, as I said at the bottom of most of the feedback for your assignments, best wishes for your future plans and incorporating these into your workplace. So, thank you.